Alright, so here we have GearBest BFight 210. This is a BnF quadcopter, and it comes in several options for radio receiver. They offer FrSky, FlySky, DSMX, and also without a receiver. So if you want to install your own receiver, you can pick that option. So the basics are it's got a 4mm arms. It's separate arms. So there's 4 separate arms with a 1.5mm plates top and bottom. So it's a pretty simple basic frame design. It comes already pre-assembled, so everything's already mounted and soldered, and including these sleeves, which is kind of a nice touch. So they kind of protect the wires there. I usually like to put cut up props, and I just zip tie them because sometimes the props will bend and they'll rip through the wires like so. So that's something to think about. The basic components, it's a 4-in-1 30 amp ESC. It's got a F3 FC, which is, it's got the omnibus target, so it's got an OSD, and also has a SD card for black box logging. Kind of a nice touch. I noticed here it's got a beeper, built-in beeper, so that's pretty cool. And the topmost board is VTX. That one's a 25 milliwatt and 200 milliwatt VTX, 40 channel 5.8, which has a MMX connector there, and they give you 2 options. One of them is just a regular monopole, and they also give you another connector if you want to use a different antenna, like a circular polarized with the SMA connector. This particular one they sent is the DSM version. I'm gonna have to solder a FrSky because that's what I fly, so I have to solder a FrSky receiver. So if you could just barely see it there, that's the DSM really tiny receiver there. So actually it's pretty well put together. The solder joints are pretty good quality, and overall it's very well put together. So these motors are, it says Fly F2205 2300 kV, just kind of like generic motors. On one of my videos, review video, somebody mentioned a mod that they did, and that makes it easy to remove and install props. So what they did is they actually took out the nylock part of the nut. So they just kind of grind this down, and then you remove the white nylock part. It's like a nylon insert, and because these are already reverse and right thread, so all you do is you just put the prop in, and then just spin the nut in, and you can just kind of twist the prop by hand, just like so, and that's it. When you fly, it's self-tightening, so this is not coming off. You don't even need a tool to put it on. And even to take it off, if you can try to just rotate it like that, and it'll come off. It'll come off very easily. And so I'm gonna try that for the first time with this when I go test fly this. That's gonna be kind of interesting. Okay, so on this frame, as you can see, it does not come with the camera mount. It's just flat here, so you have to do your own mount. The good thing is that there's a lot of 3D printed mounts for cameras. They already have an angle on them, so you could just use one of those and use a Velcro strap here just to secure it to the top plate. So that's one way of doing it. At the bottom, I added this piece of foam. It's just those double-sided foam, and that one's just to keep the battery in place, so that kind of helps, so the battery won't slide, and also prevents the head of the screws from denting the battery. So that has a double purpose there. The arms do look kind of thin, so a little bit too thin here in this area, so that might be a weak point. I haven't checked to see if they offer replacement arms. And now let's see what it weighs. They were saying 268, but I believe that's without props and without this this strap. This strap is actually a little bit on the heavy side. And so let's see what it weighs with everything. 278. So that sounds about right. If they said 268, they don't mention if they weigh it with props or with that strap. So 278 is actually pretty decent weight for a 5-inch quad. That's pretty good. To get the weight, I mean, you have to compromise in some areas. So I guess in this case they made the arms pretty thin, not as wide this way, and they're only 4 millimeters in thickness. So the quad comes in just a regular cardboard box like that, and they give you these 2 Velcro straps. These are not that good. Maybe to mount the camera, I don't know. They're kind of an odd length, but for the battery, I would just use something else. But anyways, everybody's got Velcro straps laying around. And they give you 2 sets of these Gen Fan flash propellers, the 51, 52, and some zip ties, and the extra SMA antenna connector, and a set of instructions, which can come in handy because the FC pinout is there, so that comes in handy in case you need to change your receiver. That's pretty much it. They don't give you much because everything, as I said, it comes already pre-assembled, so there's not much that you need to do. Basically, in reality you just need to put the Velcro strap, install the props, bind it to your radio, then set up the beta flight according to your radio, and that's it. Go out and fly. That's all you need to do, basically. So with the 1300 milliamp Turnigy battery, I'll just put it on so you can just see how it looks. The lead for the battery is a little bit on the long side, so I'm actually gonna cut it and resolder it to the connector because it's just too long. It doesn't need to be that long. Just do it at the ESC pads. Just remove this, and then you can easily have access to the pads there. So that's what I'm gonna do because it's pretty long. As you can see, all you need is you can cut a good amount, and that will actually lose some grams, probably about maybe 1 or 2 grams more if you cut it. Could be even more. This wire is kind of heavy, so you cut it as much as you can. So then you connect there, and if you use the strap to manage the wire, then, and this is short enough, so then it should not get in the way of the prop if you do that. If you can see it there, so the prop won't hit it. Alright, so I'm gonna remove the top plate and just kind of show you the individual components. Here's the VTX. It's Aurora RC AR VTX 200, and it's already wired up. So this is kind of like a common VTX that's been coming out with this type of format where it's kind of like an letter I, and it just mounts on the stack, so it's pretty good. And it has this button here to change the channels and frequency, and I believe this one you can change the channels by a switch on your transmitter. It's not quite smart audio or the tramp protocol. It just uses the S-bus signal to switch channels only, I believe. So I don't know how good that works. We'll see if it's already wired, and we'll see if it works. So here's the camera taken apart. This is the main board of the camera with the sensor. They're saying it's CCD sensor, so I'm not sure if that's CCD or CMOS. I don't know how to tell the difference yet. I would have to research that. And this is the back of the board, and I can't recognize the DSP, the main chip that controls everything, imaging and all that stuff. So I don't know what brand it is. Usually most of them will have a Sony or a Nex chip or something is the most common one on the HS1177. This one I can't tell what that is. And it's got this joystick here that sticks out from the back, and that one's to change the settings in the camera. So that'll stick out back there, and then you just move it. And the lens, it's supposed to be 2.5 millimeter. It should be, as you can see, it's a little bit wider than the typical 2.8. It's got a built-in IR filter. Though the back of the lens is kind of narrow, so I hope that doesn't cause a lot of distortion. Usually the lenses that have like a small these generic lenses that have a small hole opening there, you get distortion on the side, but 2.5 should be okay. I think we'll see when we do the test flights. So let's see this up close. Okay, so here's the sensor up close. I don't know if it's CCD or CMOS, but it almost looks like it has a 16:9 format. As you can see, it's more of a rectangle than a square. So I don't know if it's 16:9. It doesn't say that on the specs, but that's kind of interesting. So maybe some of you guys know how to tell the different sensors apart. So there it is for you to see. And the casing of the camera is actually all metal. So I wish they had made this plastic, so it would maybe save a couple of more grams. But that's fine. I mean, the overall weight is what matters, I guess. Okay, so as you can see, everything is actually very well soldered. I don't see anything that has been haphazardly soldered. A lot of times what you see in these pre-built quads is that you'll see wires that have, like, they don't leave enough sheeting on the wire, so they peel it back a lot because of the heat. But in this case, it's actually quite good. As you can see, very nice beads on the solder. The length of the wire is not too bad, so everything's been very well put together. This is the DSMX receiver, quite tiny. So I'm gonna replace that with the FR Sky one. And there's the F3 board. Has built-in buzzer, so that's pretty good. Alright, so now the standoffs are removed, and so we can easily lift each of the boards. Pretty good actually. Everything's pretty well put together. There's the wire for the ESC. Pretty good length of wire. Nothing really excessive. And I'm actually looking at the ESC, and quite a good surprise actually. I was noticing the FETs on these 4-in-1 ESC are the pretty heavy duty ones. The International Rectifier 5301. So those have really very high current rating. So that's pretty good. Those are very solid FETs. I like them a lot. They're very stable, and they can pretty much take anything on 4S. Actually, these ESCs, it almost looks like it's a clone of my Airbot maybe. And I've seen this same board from, I think I reviewed it earlier. You can look for it. It's similar to the iFlyRC.com 30 amp 41 ESC that I reviewed I forget, a month or two ago. So it looks very similar. It's got the same fits, and I've been using that one quite a lot, and it's just very solid. So my best guess is that this is going to be very solid ESC. It looks exactly the same. And looking from the bottom, it does have a shunt resistor there, so this has a current sensor built in, and you can see the solder points right there. They're pretty good, actually. Very good soldering. Every bead looks nice and shiny, and it's a nice round blob, so no cold solders there. Pretty good impression. All the work that they did on this. I mean, you can just see it there, and actually very easy to work on it. Everything's easily removable. Like, you don't have to do any crazy stuff to remove things. You screw the nylon standoffs right there, then the next board is on top. Screw the next second stack of nylon standoffs, and then this board goes there. So you just kind of fold the wire in, and that's it. That's all there is to it. Pretty well done, actually. Pretty well done. Okay, so let me see if I can take one of these motors apart and just kind of have a look at it. Okay, so here's the motor off the arm, and this one's branded Fluv Fly F2205 2300 kV. So this one's just a generic motor, and looking at it close, it's just exactly the same as the Surpass motor that I reviewed, also sent by GearBest. And I'm gonna link the review to that motor in the corner here. So if you wanna see the results for the thrust test on that motor and a full review on the motor, you can check that video. So it actually did pretty good for the price of that motor. It was very low budget motor, but it performed quite well. And as far as build of the motor, it was pretty decent. So this should be about the same. It's actually not, as far as the build on the motor, is not that bad. Of course, still a budget motor, so you know, it's not gonna be like same performance as the brand name motors. But overall, it's pretty decent. So it's a 2205, and you can see the windings on the motor are not too bad. Bearings, they look like generic bearings, so you know, and the bell of the motor, you can see the magnets there. They don't seem to be curved, but they're pretty good density on the magnets, and it's been balanced, and it looks like they're using those cooling, active cooling there on top of the bell. There's some veins right there. So that's the motor. And so, well, that's pretty much the teardown of the components. So I'm gonna put it back together. I'm gonna put the FR Sky receiver and then just configure it on BetaFlight configurator, so to get it ready to fly. Right, so once put back together, I headed to the park and gave it its maiden flight. I was actually quite surprised how responsive it felt, given the 2205 and 2300 size motors, but these actually match well with the GenFan 5152 props. I actually haven't flown those that much with 2205 motors, so I wasn't expecting that much performance, but actually they do work quite well on the 2205. Also, I didn't notice any major voltage sag, so that tells me the motors are quite efficient with this prop. So overall, the motor and prop combination felt pretty good. I mean, it's not gonna be like race quality type of power, but for freestyling, as you can see, it's plenty. Again, it's not gonna be like outrageously powerful, but it's good enough. On a punch, you gain speed and elevation quite rapidly. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention the amp sensor on the OSD is not calibrated, so it's displaying lower amperage than what it should be. So overall, a pretty decent ready to fly BnF Flight quad from GearBest. The components are quite solid. The only thing, as I mentioned before, is the frame. It's a little bit on the thin side on the arms, but other than that, all the components are pretty good, so you can always transfer them to any other frame. So there it is. That's the review of the BFight 210. Hopefully you find this useful, and as always, thanks for watching, and until the next video.